All right, folks, welcome back aboard for the latest edition of the Last Word on Sports Media podcast. I am the somewhat competent co-host, TJ Reeves. Look who's back from the Big Easy and the Philadelphia Eagles win and the parade. Hello, Mike Gill. And that ain't the whole story, because you went transcontinental to what? To Thailand and wherever else in the middle of the NFL playoffs, only to come back for Super Bowl week and the Eagles win. It's good to have you back, Mike Gill. Here on the LWS Media Podcast.
That's right. I was keeping up with the football. I woke up at 3 o'clock in the morning to watch in Bangkok, and I think the second game I watched, I think I was in the PP Islands at that point, but I was up, I watched, and then I came home. I was home for 4 days, and I went to New Orleans and covered the Super Bowl week on Media Row. Then I was in your neck of the woods in Tampa. I called a couple games for MLB Network for the Clearwater softball event down there, and was home the day after Super Bowl 59 and back on the radio. So here we are.
It has been a trip. Now, I just wonder, were there other Americans that cared about the football that you were commiserating with when you were over there, or were you basically... You're lonesome. You and your significant other are like the only two that care about the Eagles and the playoffs and the Chiefs.
Yeah, nobody really cared about the game at 3 o'clock in the morning. My girlfriend did wake up one of the games. The second one, I couldn't get her to get up.
Later in the day, like at breakfast or lunch, were there any Americans around or anybody that cared, or you're just kind of isolated?
No, in fact, we went to an establishment that was owned by an Australian gentleman, and he said that he put the game on there at like 6:30 in the morning, the AFC Championship game, and there was only 2 people that came in to watch it. So not a lot of interest in I
understand. And then you go to the other extreme in New Orleans where there's 9,703 media people, and just give me the quick encapsulated experience and Radio Row and all of that with the Eagles being back in the Super Bowl.
Yeah, I mean, you talk about Last Word on Sports Media. They've changed the name of it from Radio Row to Media Row. It's basically a who's who. My setup was right in front of the Pat McAfee show. So I actually got a chance to talk to Pat McAfee for a couple minutes, very short. I got to say, he did his show, what's he on, noon to 2.
Right.
And my show starts at,
I believe that's right, noon to 2 Eastern time, every day.
Yes. After his show was over, he probably stood out there and talked to people, like took questions from like students or people, 2 to 3 hours. I mean, he answered every single person's question.
Interviews, all kinds of
just
things.
Like people like any advice you have for somebody trying to get like a lot of people asking about like YouTube, social media, that kind of stuff, like any advice, like just do so, like, and he took the time to answer. I mean, you got to give it to the guy. He stood there and answered every single question. So that was, one thing you saw a lot on Media Row. In addition to a lot of the sports media podcasts, your Andrew Marchands and your Brian Curtis and that crew, they were there to cover Tom Brady. Everybody wanted to talk to Tom Brady. He obviously called the Super Bowl, which we can get into thoughts on that if you'd like. I know I wasn't on last week. But, the media event is turned into, just a video, a lot of video, YouTube channels and the like. So,
It's definitely different. All right, give me the 60-second take, because I gave my takes last week on the wrap up with Burkhardt and Brady and the call of the game. That was really, it was to the Eagles' excitement and to everybody else's detriment. Is a one-sided game and tough to call.
A tough game to call. It's a blowout, not going on. But I got a blowout. Who do I want to hear from in a blowout? 28-3. I got very little about that coming back there. There's your chance, Tom Brady. Make $75 million. I'm down 28-3. This is my mindset. This is what we did. This is what they need to do. And I didn't get it. I thought Brady had a chance to really take that moment and do something with it. Not enough. It just kind of ended a flat season for Brady. I had high hopes. They were not nearly met. I'm hoping that now he said he's going to stick this thing out, but you get judged on that Super Bowl, and I would say in the Super Bowl game, he wasn't awful, but a C, maybe.
Interesting. I think you're being too tough on him. I mean, he's so scrutinized at this point. There are not a lot of announcers that would have given you an awful lot with that game to work with.
But don't you agree? He's the guy you want to hear from. 28-3. Well, you had, and
what's the mindset, right?
They brought it up to him, and he didn't give you all that much in that.
Well, one of the things I will tell you this: he was all over it. Where the Buccaneers had beaten the Chiefs in the Super Bowl with him at the quarterback, and he was all over early on in the game. This is the same kind of blueprint with the Eagles front four and not having to blitz. This is how you beat Mahomes. So he, as an analyst, he honed right in on personal experience with that. So, look, I know this because he said this. Until the other NFL owners say enough is enough, he can't be a part owner and an announcer. He's going to continue to do this. So short term, get ready for 25 and for 26 that he's doing the games. Much beyond 2 or 3 years, we don't know. We've debated that before. By the way, I did not mention this at the top. We're not only doing the video show that's on Mike's YouTube page, it's also on the social media handles, Mike Gill Show's social media handle, mine, Buck Sideline Guy, streaming as an entity on social media. Find us in podcast form as well. If you're hearing the podcast, come see the video, see what we're looking like. But in podcast, go find us on Apple, Spreaker, Spotify, on Last Word on Sports Media podcast, where we break this down. So we can move off the football. The football is over. We got so much more to discuss here for just a little bit. The NBA All-Star Game. And I must confess up front, I was a much bigger glued-in fan, and I'm not alone in this regard, in the 80s and the 90s. I checked out easily 10 years ago or more on the absolute joke the NBA All-Star Game has become, Mike Gill. And so we don't, as we do this on Tuesday night into Wednesday morning, you and I, depending on when you're seeing and hearing it, we don't have the ratings. I can tell you right now that with LeBron not playing, most of America doesn't care about this anymore. And the players themselves don't care about this anymore. I don't know if it's life support or if it's got dirt being shoveled on it. What is your take on, is the All-Star Game for the NBA dead? Is it salvageable? What do you say?
Yeah, I mean, listen, it's only still going because of the ratings. The ratings have been good in the past, and these are signature events for the television stations. ABC, TNT, when they have this jewel event, they want to bring their head honchos. They want to bring their big advertisers to All-Star Weekend so they can shake hands, kiss babies, meet the head honchos. Unfortunately, I think the fans watching it, you're going to start to see the ratings dissipate. The players don't care, and now the fans don't care. Adam Silver has said we have a problem. He mentioned that. He didn't say that, but he showed you by changing the format of the game, and I think you're going to see the ratings, or we haven't seen them yet, which kind of tells you all you need to know. They probably weren't good. That was the last one on TNT. What is NBC going to do next year when they get it? And by the way, the All-Star Game next year is wrapped around the Super Bowl number 60 and the opening ceremonies of the Olympics. So you're going to have a situation where the All-Star Game fits somewhere probably third on the list of importance of those, well, definitely third behind the Super Bowl. And I would imagine the Winter Olympics are going to be higher priority. So I don't know how they're even going to handle it next year with NBC, but it's off of TNT. And I thought that was one of the problems the other night. Enough with Kevin Hart. I don't need any more Kevin Hart in any part of my life. Kevin Hart, thank you for your service. Move on. It's time for the next comedian to come in. He took over the show on TNT, and I don't even know what he was trying to be funny. Was he not trying? I don't even know what he was trying to do. The whole thing to inside the NBA with the gone fishing, I get it. That's their thing, but it was too long. Then they brought out a DJ. Somebody found in Vogue. Who knew they were still around? You're
actually educating me. I missed all of this. And again, I think for millions of big-time hardcore sports fans, they weren't watching this, especially when they found out a couple of hours before the game that LeBron James all of a sudden says, you know what, I'm good, I'm not playing in the game, and he's one of the icons. He could have said that a few days earlier, and somebody could have replaced him.
Yeah.
I think people are fed up, Mike. I know you're in an NBA area in the Philadelphia greater market. Yep. I am in sort of an NBA area, although the Orlando Magic do not register at all in West Central Florida. But if you're not in a hardcore Northeast NBA market or in LA where the Lakers are. I don't think most of America cares about this anymore, especially the All-Star game. They just do not.
Well, and All-Star games all over are having trouble. I mean,
yes.
The football Pro Bowl, that's gone away. Hockey has, I don't even know what their All-Star game is
we're
anymore.
about to talk about what they're doing instead of their All-Star game here in just a second. Probably to pick it up, the only realistic one that's still an actual game is the baseball All-Star game, because the defense and the pitching is trying. The pitcher's trying to strike people out. The defense is playing, and we don't get a bastardization of the baseball game where the baseball game is 21 to 19. We get an actual baseball game with a bunch of strikeouts and defensive plays and a game. It's about the only realistic one that's left. Would you not agree?
Yeah, because the baseball game, they're still playing a real game. The pitcher's throwing 98 miles an hour. He's got one inning to unload the tank. So he's trying. The hitter's trying. The fielders have to make plays.
Yes.
They're trying. So that game is still a real game. The basketball turned into a dunk competition, yet nobody wants to do the dunk competition. Then it turned into a half-court shot competition. It's just turned into, and, I saw somebody, I can't remember who it was. I want to give the guy credit. He works for Sirius XM Radio. He kind of blames LeBron, Steph, and Durant. He said, look, they were the three torchbearers from the Kobe era. Jordan never took this game half-ass. Kobe never took it half-assed, and they passed it over to LeBron and Curry and Durant, and they've allowed this game to become a joke. So he kind of points at those guys as, hey, the younger guys were looking at you on, how should I approach this game? And this is the way you guys are playing this game? Okay. And now you've had a whole generation of younger players who think of that game as kind of a joke.
Great point. And I think that's a great point. And I'll just wrap it on this. When you go back to the 80s, they would fool around with the alley-oops and the dunks and all of that until when? Until the fourth quarter. And then both teams would buckle down and they would play and they would defend and they would foul hard and they would do whatever. I would be better with that. I would be better with at least get some kind of competitive into the game in the fourth quarter. You don't even get that anymore. So,
well, and one of the things you're talking about, an era that's gone, there was back then you're watching that game that these guys didn't like each other,
Right.
The Celtics didn't like the Lakers, and Bird didn't like Magic, and Dr. J didn't like,
Bird.
Those days are way over, and you're not getting them back.
And you bring up a great point, too, that the mega millions are now there. They have their money, so the All-Star game doesn't have any meaning for that reason.
I don't know if you saw this. The Athletic did a survey about how to make the game more competitive. And they poll current players in the league. They do this at the All-Star break. They ask a bunch of questions. And one of the questions is, how can they help the All-Star game? And, of course, all the answers were, make it for money. And I'm thinking, if that's the answer to the question, then that's a bad answer. You make a salary. That's what you get. If you make the All-Star game, you probably get a bonus in your salary.
But especially the elite of the elite are making $30, $35, $40 million a year already, regardless of whether they even play in this game. You're right. The responsibility is on the mega stars to have fixed this. They don't care. I take it back to last summer and how much we cared about the Olympics and the gold medal and all those same guys going hard to win the gold medal. And remember, I related the story of being in the Cincinnati Bengals press box for the Buccaneer preseason game, and the entire working media in the press box stopped for 20 minutes to watch the end of that game. They cared, and NBC got a great rating in the middle of the afternoon on Saturday afternoon, early evening, because they cared. And it's a gold medal, and that's different. That's going to segue us into the hockey here in a second, but that's what the NBA has to try to get back. And those same guys, LeBron, Steph, Kevin Durant, Embiid, all of the big time players, they cared. So that takes us to the hockey and this Four Nations tournament that will culminate Thursday night as we release this show and podcast, with the United States playing Canada. And it was wild. Mike, when did you become aware? Were you watching live, or when did you become aware of how the first game got underway Saturday night? Because the internet went nuclear on Saturday with the highlights of all of the fights in Game 1 in Montreal on Saturday night. When did you become aware of this, or were you maybe perhaps watching?
I wasn't watching live. No, I wasn't watching NBA All-Star Weekend either. So, Saturday night we went out. Actually, it was out meeting my mother, recapping all our travels. We were meeting up with her for the first time. But, it was later on that night you started to see the fights and the excitement there. And then, of course, you've got this thing going on where Canada's booing the anthem, and then tonight, I guess it was, or the Americans are booing the Canadian anthem. So this feels like Rocky IV, like it's like
including the fights. And let's prop Sean McDonough, by the way, too. He and Ray Ferraro did a great job, but McDonough in particular, not only the call of the fights, raising the attention to it and the drama to it and the backstory to it, but then it was a great game, and he was all over it with the call. The game ended up being a 2-1 game with an empty net goal that made it 3-1 for the United States. And it's no coincidence that after the fights and all the stuff on social media and the internet, the game rating went up and up, and they had over 4.5 million people watching hockey for the U.S. and Canada going at it.
And you're going to get the final on Thursday night, and I'm imagining that number is going to go up even higher. I mean, you would imagine. I wouldn't be surprised if it was in the 6 million range.
And again, this is like the basketball gold medal game. These are unique, different things, country against country here, bad blood with the build-up. I mean, I loved it. The full length of that clip when the first fight had happened, a couple of seconds into the game, they dropped the gloves. Ray Ferraro was between the benches for ESPN as their analyst, and he said, I'm going to tell you right now, Sean, they're about to do this again because Matthew Tkachuk and his teammate with the Florida Panthers, Sam Bennett, who's playing for Canada, Tkachuk on the United States, Sam Bennett for Canada, they were yapping at each other, and Tkachuk said, Benny, you're next. Get out there. And they both we're next. Get out there. And they dropped the gloves again, orchestrated. Some believe, weigh in on this, some believe that some of this was orchestrated to stir up the attention for the NHL. Steal from the NBA. Do you buy into that a little WWE style scripted
I wouldn't
narrative?
be shocked. In fact, it's interesting because PK Subban, I don't know if you heard what he had to say, but he took some major shots at the NBA, and his whole reasoning was, look at these guys. These guys are fighting each other, all for their country. They care. They play hurt all the time. These guys load manage. So he really took some shots at the NBA. Would I be surprised if what you're saying is accurate? Not in the least bit. It crossed my mind, actually, that they said, hey, guys, let's get a little attention on NBA All-Star Weekend and see if we can steal some thunder for them. Now, one of the things that the NBA has talked about is potentially for the All-Star game doing USA versus the world. The one issue I have with that is I think the NBA, the American players would be against that because they probably would lose the game.
They might.
I think they would.
And the only thing is you already had that with the Olympics. That was the USA against the world, and it ended up being the United States against the French for the gold medal.
But if you put all of the European players together
on one All-Star team,
as one All-Star team, now you're talking Jokic and Luka and Embiid and Giannis and Victor Wembanyama.
Oh, yeah.
Now you're in trouble.
That would be interesting. All right, so good stuff on the All-Star game, on the Four Nations. Where do you want to go next? I know you've been away overseas, you on vacation, you've been back for the Super Bowl. What else are we leaving out? There's a couple of other things that we're obviously going to talk about, but is there something else that jumps out to you right now?
Oh, I think today I came across, how about everybody has been wondering what Netflix next move is. It appears that they want to get in on NFL Sunday now. Everybody thought, okay, they have the Christmas Day game. They don't really want a big package. Well, apparently they do. Apparently Netflix is interested in a Sunday package. Who are they going to go after? The Fox NFC, which they don't really do that anymore, but it's still an NFC-based package. Or CBS. Does Netflix take one of those two away, or does it go after the NBC Sunday night package? Does NBC say, we're hemorrhaging from this NBA package, take the NFL? I doubt that's what they would do.
No way. No
way. I agree. But if Netflix wants one of them, I would imagine they're going to get one.
And maybe that's the bidding for the Thursday night game with Amazon. And CBS and Fox are going to do everything they can to hang on to those games for Sunday afternoon. Do they create another window? This has been theorized in the past. Do they create another window? Because the NFL, believe it or not, Mike, used to do this back in the 70s and the early 80s, where games would start at 1 Eastern time, but like in the Mountain and the Central time zone, don't laugh, and audience don't laugh, because of church. When church used to be a priority, they would start later in the Central and the Mountain Time Zone where they had like a 3 p.m. Eastern kickoff because it was 2 Central and it was 1 Mountain Time in those time zones. They would have staggered start times. You didn't go to the traditional 1 p.m., 4 p.m. till like later on in the mid-1980s of that happening. So my question to you is, might they go to something like a 6 p.m. single kickoff that's like at halftime of the late games, and that game blends in with the end of the early games and the start of the Sunday night game? Do you buy that they create a new window to bring a Netflix or somebody else in? What do you think?
I would think, and I would. They have discussed about expanding the international schedule to 16 weeks. They're going to move the schedule to 18 weeks. That we know. That's going to happen sooner than later. 18 regular season games, likely 2 bye weeks. So you would have 16 international games at 9:30 in the morning, and I think that's a window that is likely Netflix could possibly jump in on that and say, we'll take the Sunday 9:30 international package
because right
Netflix,
now
you can watch everywhere.
Correct. Right now they split it with the NFL Network and with ESPN Plus, and they have on occasion had a network doing the game like CBS or Fox even early morning, but they primarily have split it. It would be interesting if they had that full of a package and went with one entity. You flew right by. What do you think of my idea of like the medium range spot of kick another game off at like 6? Because one of the other things that would help with that is if you have 2 or 3 games going in the late afternoon, let's say you kick 2 of them off around 4 Eastern time, 4:30 Eastern time, adjust your time zone. If they are both bad, at least you get a fresh start with a new game at around 6 Eastern time that's kind of in the middle, and Sunday Night Football is still basically a standalone with that one game ending and then the Sunday night game kicking off around 8:30 Eastern time. You buy that at all?
I like the idea, and you see, like ESPN, ABC has done this where they air one game at like 8 o'clock, the other one at 8:30, and people are like, why are they kind of doing like this overlap? I'm not dismissing it, but I don't think that's the top priority for them. I think it's probably that. Now, the report that I read says that Netflix is looking to snag the afternoon package from Fox or CBS. So they are directly going for one of those 2 packages is the reporting.
All right. Interesting on what Netflix might or might not do. Speaking of Fox, big weekend right off the Super Bowl for them. They had the Daytona 500, NASCAR's biggest race. It was rain delayed. It did not end. Race was to have started at around 2:30 Eastern time. They moved it up. They started it earlier, just before 2 Eastern time, because they knew they had rain in the forecast. It was still rain delayed all afternoon. Then they had wrecks and delays for cautions and cleaning up the track. Race did not end until about 9:30, so it bled into prime time for Fox. We don't have the numbers as of yet. They should be out. Some kind of number should be out on Wednesday on what that did. William Byram, by the way, won the race in the old Jeff Gordon 24 Chevrolet. So I don't know what the audience number is going to end up being, but it is interesting that was supposed to be done well before prime time, but it actually ended up being a prime time finish. Did the Daytona 500 get 3 million people to watch, 4 million people to watch? I'd be shocked if it was much more than that, Mike Gill, on Daytona and Fox. I don't know.
That I couldn't tell you because I know, but I do know, and I'm only chiming in on this. I heard people say, hey, listen, I went and watched the NASCAR race had my attention more than the NBA did that particular day. So.
Right, the All-Star game going on at the same time.
Exactly.
And also, by the way, Fox has gotten the IndyCar series away from NBC. Remember, the IndyCar series for so many years was on ABC with the Indy 500. But Fox will now be doing the IndyCar series starting in March and the Indianapolis 500 on Fox. Multi-year deal starts this year. So they're heavy now with NASCAR and IndyCar racing into the auto racing. What else, Mike?
Just real quick, there's the report from Sports Business Journal. Netflix says they're definitely interested in Sunday afternoon games. Other reports say they want the Fox or CBS deal. So that is a real possibility. And then on the other note, you've got ESPN Major League Baseball potentially ending their relationship of Sunday Night Baseball, which has gone on for decades now. And ESPN
going all the way back to 1990 when they created the Sunday night game of the week. So we're working on 35 years of the Sunday night game. Could be an exit there, and part of it is all of the baseball games everywhere now are on TV, and the novelty of the Sunday night game is just not the same anymore as it used to be. That game, I know this, in the 90s and the early 2000s, that game a lot of the time would have 6, 7, 8 million people watching because there were so many few options and it was the only game on. Now every game is on everywhere, every day and every night. And I think it dilutes it and it hurts it, Mike.
No doubt. And listen, $550 million a year ESPN's paying for that. And they're just saying, look, that is not fiscally responsible for us to play Sunday Night Baseball, get 1.5 million viewers for $550 million. And then they have the playoffs, but they're getting playoff games that aren't, you're getting these early round wild card games that haven't been all that good. They don't get Fox has the World Series, so they're not getting the World Series. They're not getting the Championship Series. They're on TNT. So ESPN gets these early round playoffs, which have not been great.
Remember, the impact was for so long that they had the stranglehold on the highlights with Baseball Tonight every night to show you the highlights of all the games. Well, now you have this thing called the internet. You can see all the highlights immediately on that. You have an MLB network that competes against you that has the games and has the highlights on demand with that. So I can see where maybe they want to spend their resources and their money on other things, the NFL, college football. By the way, ESPN did announce on Tuesday that Joe Buck will call a major league game for the first time. Mike is showing it to the TV audience since 2021 when he left Fox as the longtime national voice of Major League Baseball on Fox. He will cover the Milwaukee Brewer New York Yankee opener with the death of Bob Uecker at 90 years of age as the broadcaster. They're going to pay tribute, obviously, to him. You've got the Yankees, the defending American League champs. Joe Buck back with what? Joe Girardi, and who else is on that broadcast crew? Girardi, the former Yankee world champion player.
Bill Schroeder.
Bill Schroeder
yes,
will also be part of it. So what do you think about Joe Buck back on the MLB coverage on ESPN, at least for a game?
I think he's the best when it comes to that. I think it's one of the things that baseball lacks is a voice. They don't have a national voice. I know Joe Davis does the World Series, but, there's no identifiable voice like Mike Breen to the NBA, like all of the, Joe Buck is to the NFL. Baseball, Joe Davis doesn't call games every week. He just pops in at the World Series. Hey, here I am. I think that's a big problem for baseball. And, they don't have a national appeal. These regional sports networks, which are dying right now. So baseball will say, well, why NBA getting $76 billion? Why not us? It's not a national sport. It's very regionalized. It's kind of like, it's a problem where we talked about this during the World Series. Your biggest games of the year are being broadcasted by people who are not identifiable voices to the audience.
Yeah, and again, Joe Davis does some of the games in the summer with John Smoltz, but as you mentioned, he does the NFL.
Not all of them.
Not all of them, and he does the NFL as well. And Davis also is the LA Dodgers voice.
And Davis is very good, by the way. He is. I don't. If you don't watch the Saturday Fox baseball game that he's calling, you're like, hey, it's the only time I've ever heard this guy is in the World Series or in the NLCS.
All right, so again, that's the MLB coverage that's coming up. Couple more things on the Last Word on Sports Media podcast with TJ and Mike here with you. Let's do a remembrance of Greg Sharp, the longtime 17-year play-by-play voice of the Nebraska Cornhuskers. Greg passed away earlier this week from prostate cancer. He had been battling cancer for the better part of a year and a half. This is a sobering thing for all the adult men and women to get yourself screened for early detection of cancer, in particular females with breast cancer, for men with prostate cancer. It's colon cancer. It's a very real thing. And Greg Sharp had a courageous year-long battle with cancer. The Nebraska family is a tight-knit. The Cornhusker fans. Greg was doing football, basketball, and Cornhusker baseball For the last 17 years, he previously had been the Kansas State play-by-play guy for right around a decade. He leaves behind a wife, children, and the Nebraska community is mourning him. So shout out to him. You couple that, Mike, I don't know that you've been on with me, with the death of the Navy play-by-play man, Pete Medhurst, who had been associated with the Navy broadcast for over 30 years in Annapolis as the radio guy on the football and other broadcasts for the Naval Academy.
In fact,
Pete passed away, and you're in his region. And what else on Pete Medhurst as well?
We had him on the Announcer Schedules podcast, Phil and I, so you can go back in the archives and just listen to the passion he had for that game and the stories that he told leading up to that week. We had talked to him probably 2 years ago, I guess, getting ready for Army-Navy. I had talked to him on a couple of different occasions about that game. Man, it's chilling to hear that. Awful stuff. Rest in peace, Greg Sharp. Rest in peace, Pete Medhurst, who do what we do in sports media. Can I brighten it up? I know she's departed, but a shout out to Amy Lawrence of the Infinity Sports Network, what was CBS Sports Radio previously, the overnight host for the inception up until right after the Super Bowl a week and a half ago. She had been the 13-year overnight host on that network. From 2 to 6 a.m. Eastern time, not exactly an easy shift. After Hours with Amy Lawrence, I had been a guest on her show. She previously had worked for ESPN Radio as a host. Amy is without a doubt a trailblazer, a female doing national sports radio for 13 consecutive years on a network. And she is someone that is very giving of her time and effort. You mentioned McAfee earlier in this sports media pod. Amy teaches classes back at the Newhouse School at Syracuse, where she graduated from, and mentors young broadcasters through that broadcasting school. I say tip of the hat, bravo to Amy Lawrence. Enjoy retirement. She's recently married. Enjoy married life, retired life. Enjoy sleeping overnight. She hasn't been sleeping overnights, Mike Gill, for the better part of the last decade and a half. So kudos to a great run from Amy Lawrence. Class, very well versed in all sports, and she's given a couple of interviews. I might get her on at some point with us where she'll say the same thing. It was just time. I had been doing this for so long and for so many years. I have other things that I want to do, travel, married life, etc. I get it. So kudos to Amy Lawrence. Yeah, in fact, you mentioned ESPN Radio. I've been on the network for 20 years, so she was on our airwaves for a long, long time. In fact, I just saw her post that right before we connected here tonight that she was leaving the overnights, and I was thinking, man, that's a long time to be living the overnights life. It's funny, when I was at Media Row, I got a chance to talk to another women's trailblazer in the media world, and that's Laura Oakman, who was on the sideline for the Super Bowl this year, again for Westwood One Radio, and she has started to galvanize.
Phenomenal program. Tell them more about Galvanize.
Yeah, they were at Media Row, and I'll tell you what, they were just constantly putting content out and just energy and putting just great messaging out there. If you follow Laura Oakman, because she came on the radio with and talked about it at Laura Oakman on the X platform, you can see a lot of the sights and the sounds and what they're doing. But it was really cool to talk to her because she, people don't realize Laura's been around. She's done so many Super Bowls and was a member of the Westwood One broadcast. But she was out there, got a chance to talk to Josina Anderson, who's also got her new YouTube. The Exhibit is her thing. So a lot of these women in sports media are branching off and creating their own brands and stuff now. So hopefully,
Laura's program, that Galvanized program, that's the name, GAL, has literally had over 200 young ladies, young women, going through the process of college graduation, internship, how to break into the business. She does these different seminars all over the country. Boot camps all over the country for young females to get them into TV, the internet, podcast, video shows, etc. You talk about reaching back and helping create a platoon of young females that are ready for the sports broadcasting business in specific. Again, tip of the hat to Laura Oakman reaching back. She's got others helping her with that program, but she is the front runner, the trailblazer leading that galvanized program, and so good on her.
Yeah.
She had a lot of those ladies there. I've actually on more than one occasion connected with Laura privately and said, I know of XYZ that is looking to hire and they want a strong female that can write and be on the camera. Give me somebody from Galvanize. And she's recommended 3 or 4 people right away as a resource. So good on Laura Oakman to follow up on that as well.
Yeah, she was, and by the way, just a great storyteller, giving us great information about her interactions with the Philadelphia. I was covering the Eagles, so more on the Eagles side of things. But, just some of the people she talked to getting ready for that game. And so always good to catch up with her down there.
No doubt. All right. Have we pretty well covered it all on this edition? Did we leave anything else out that's pertinent here in late February? You and I are big college basketball people. It's cranking up for March and March Madness, and we're about to have the baseball and the golf is coming. We'll eventually get to the Masters right after the Final Four. All the big events, the Daytona 500, the Indianapolis 500, all of these different things that'll be building as February becomes March, becomes April, becomes May. Mike Gill, anything else?
You mentioned March Madness is coming, and there's a lot of buzz about that tournament expanding, and I hope that doesn't happen, but that
you and I in agreement. Zero need. I keep saying this. We don't need more teams, and they don't have to have more money. They make billions off of this already, and if it's not enough, put it back up for bid. Opt out of the deal and put it back up for bid, and watch how much money CBS and Warner Brothers Discovery will be willing to pay and keep it there. You and I are in agreement. You don't have to expand it.
And listen, I think college basketball, it's going to be interesting because Cooper Flagg has kind of hinted that he wants to go back to Duke. Is this the beginning of some of these players saying, I'm going to stay in school. I'm making enough NIL money. I'm not ready. I like college. I like, the life. So we'll see.
It's a great point you make. It's a great point you make because my understanding, I have this from 2 different people. He's making around $4.5 million on NIL. If he were to return, Mike Gill, to Duke, and let's say they run all the way to the Final Four, maybe they win it, maybe they don't. He's going to get so much attention, so much publicity. They could easily recoup paying him $15-20 million in NIL. To your point, would Cooper Flagg maybe be a prototype of if you're big enough at a brand name school like Duke, do you stick around for an extra year or two and make a boatload of NIL money versus going to a bad NBA team and playing 82 games instead of 30 games in the regular season before the postseason? What do you think of that? Could he be? It's not as far-fetched as you would think. That's what I would say in response.
Yeah,
what do you say?
I do think you will see if you are making enough NIL money. I think some people who are happy with their situation, a little bit more willing to stick around. I bring it up like college basketball. Love college basketball. What used to be the biggest thing in college basketball? Duke, North Carolina. Does anybody know when that game's even played? Does anybody care anymore?
Right.
The kids leaving to go to the NBA have killed that game. Nobody cares because what made that game what it was you played them as freshmen and lost. You came back as sophomores and beat them, and then they beat, and that is out the window. And both those teams are not the same stature as they used to be. But maybe this kid can be the guy who says, look, I'm going to be the guy that's the trendsetter. Let's stay. We're making enough money. Now, I don't know Cooper Flagg's family background, history, how much money his family has. Does he not need a bigger deal than $4.5 million? Is he okay walking around the Duke campus making $4 million? Not everybody can say, hey, $4 million's good, but I need 20. I need 30,
And Duke can pay it. And again, the NIL is Wild West right now, and Duke can pay it. So stay tuned. I was mildly bringing this up, and now others are bringing it up as well. Let's just see. I mean, if they run to the Final Four, he's the player of the year, and they win the whole thing. That may change the argument. If it's unfinished business, then maybe he wants to come back and try to win a national championship, and they can pay him a boatload of money, and it's allowed. by the NCAA, maybe he does.
Well, and there was a discussion about Caitlin Clark, which she could have gone back to Iowa. She chose not to. Some people thought she could have made enough NIL, which she certainly would have made more than she makes in the WNBA, which I think is only like $75,000.
She makes around, I believe for the rookies, they make around $180,000. The veterans make like between $350 and $450, and that's it.
Yeah,
as a veteran player,
But
as a veteran player, it's going to go up. But as a veteran player, it's not like you're making $4 or $5 million in the WNBA. That's not how.
No, so some had speculated that she can make more money if she stayed at Iowa. Well, and of course, she gets she's got all sorts of endorsement deals, so she's not hurting for cash. But she could have stayed at Iowa and got the NIL money that could have justified her staying there, where she would have made more than she makes in salary in the WNBA.
Yep. So it's all a matter of who makes what with the NIL, and do the pros make sense? And again, on the NBA argument, it's 82 regular season games versus 30. You can wait to start that clock for a year. And I saw something where people were writing, but he has to wait an extra year for the possibility of his max contract in the NBA. Like he's somehow not going to get a max contract the year after he was supposed to get it. Of course, he's going to get the max contract. So. And he can take out an insurance policy. That's not an issue either.
Just imagine being a college student with $4.5 million at your disposal.
And by the way, you're the biggest rock star in college basketball, especially if you come back and you're 18 or 19 years old. And you're just another NBA player if you go to the NBA. Just food for thought.
Well, he would be the number one pick in the draft.
Yeah, but they have number one picks every year, and they just kind of become food for, become one of those guys.
I'm hoping he makes the decision to stay and that others follow him, and you start to see the college game build back up. You know why?
Maybe.
The pro game right now is going through some bumps, some speed bumps with the quality of the game is not where people want it to be. So maybe let them refigure that out and stay in the college game for another year. We'll see.
Like it all, did we cover it all in the Last Word on Sports Media podcast? Anything we've left out? I think we're good. I'm anxious to see what this hockey game will do Thursday night with the Four Nations final in Boston, the United States and Canada. Will it be the sequel with the fights? I don't think so. I think that was a one-time thing. Other than that, I think we're good, Mike Gill. There's
always a lot happening, and if we missed it, we apologize, but we'll be back again next week.
Yes, and if we get interviews between now and then, we'll stick them up on the feed as well. The video show again on Mike's YouTube page, Mike Gill Show on YouTube. Follow him at Mike Gill Show, and Mike does a great job on the ESPN radio affiliate, as he's mentioning, in Atlantic City with the Sports Bash each weekday afternoon, 2 to 6 Eastern time. Follow me at Buck Sideline Guy, BUC Buck Sideline Guy, if you're listening here on the pod. It's the Last Word on Sports Media podcast, lastwordonsports.com/podcast to find out more. For now, we are good. Thank you for being with us on the LWOS Media Pod.